Welcome to the CareGiver Reality Show with your hosts, David Levy and Paul Vadiato, who bring you more than a combined 25 years of practical experience, helping thousands of family caregivers, helping them find solutions to the challenges and frustrations presented by this important responsibility. So if you are in the position of caring for a spouse or a parent, a loved one who is no longer able to care for themselves, or if you know someone who is, this hour will be worth the listening. Now, let's tune in to today's edition of CareGiver Reality with your hosts, David Levy and Paul Vadiato.
Good evening, South Florida, America, and the world. This is the CareGiver Reality Hour because it's 5 o'clock drive time on the East Coast and 4 o'clock drive time in Central USA. And we're here tonight with a very special guest, Muriel Goldrich, a good friend and a caregiver par excellence, who will share some of her wisdom with you. You're listening to us on the CareGiver Reality Hour at caregiverreality.com, iHeartRadio, YouTube, TuneIn, AMP2.tv, and WWNN1470.com. So no excuse not to hear us or listen. Our numbers are growing, so we know that you are. And it's been a gorgeous day here in South Florida. Don't mean to rub it in, but it was in the 70s. It was cool. It was blue skies and puffy white clouds. And so for the rest of you that it wasn't, you should be here in South Florida. Paul, good evening. How was your week?
Well, good evening, David, and good evening to all of our listeners. Thank you for joining us today. Sometimes when you have too much of a good thing, there's sort of a bounce back thing. Mm-hmm. We have Thanksgiving coming up, and you know that feeling after you've had a good dinner and all of the sweets and all of the chocolates, and you sit down, and then all of a sudden, wow, out of energy. And I think that's been my week in caregiving with Debbie.
I thought you were going to say then the stomach ache hit.
No, it wasn't that. It's just a little bit too much and overdone, so there was a bounce back effect and just a couple of very tired days. But yeah, she really had a good time being with us last week and with Suzette. It was good to hear everyone. I guess our report card was okay. David, how was Suzette?
Suzette has had a very difficult week. We did the show, but she has had a very difficult time. She's been sleeping a lot, not because I'm boring, but it's just because whatever's going on with her dysautonomia and everything else, mm-hmm. and in spite of the fact that she, goes to a sleep doctor and wears that CPAP and everything, even when she gets a good night's sleep, it's right back to sleep. And so what I'm doing is we have a good friend of ours up in Maryland who has a similar condition, and they're now getting on the buddy phone call, you can't sleep any longer than this routine, and it starts tomorrow. Good idea. And I told the woman up in, actually, her name is Debbie Dominelli, and she happens to be head of the Dysautonomia Youth National Association that she and I and a couple of others co-founded many years ago. And her daughter has dysautonomia, and she has myasthenia gravis. So she has a lot of difficulty, but she's a sleeper as well. So they're now going to be each other's rooster, even though it may happen at noon. So, but it hasn't been easy. She's had a tough week. One of her big problems is she had knee surgery, as you know, right, in last March. And that knee is giving her a lot of trouble, a lot of pain. And so tomorrow we see the surgeon and find out kind of what's going on.
Hopefully good news.
Well, hopefully some news. Good news would be nice, but the pain hasn't gone away in the last 3 weeks or so. And so I don't think it's the mechanical knee itself. It seems to be a little bit lower than that, but who am I to know? So I guess we'll have to wait out an X-ray and find out.
Yes, and to our listeners, David and I have been talking about our wives. Last week, you got to meet them again for our update. But those that have or are caregivers to someone with autoimmune disorders, I'm sure what we're talking about is very familiar. If you go to Caregiver Reality on Facebook, share with us some of your experiences and some of the things that you're going through. And we're really a community, and this is a place for a discussion, and we welcome your input. David?
Absolutely, and it doesn't just have to be autoimmune, except we are spouses of autoimmune. And it's a very difficult thing because autoimmune diseases typically are a cluster of symptoms rather than a very specific thing. You don't just have autoimmune. You have a cluster of things, and included in that is immune disorder issues. And so it's very difficult because one day something's working and the next day something isn't working. And,
it's waiting which shoe is going to drop.
Yeah, and then which one's going to bounce back up. And so it's very complicated. And over the years, it's been now, gosh, I guess close to 17 years that she's had this in one form or another. But it gets more complicated as time goes by. And when you look at the disease of dysautonomia, the problem for her is that for the most part, it's diagnosed in children. And so everybody is a pediatric cardiologist. And there's no such thing. There may be a geriatric cardiologist, but they do not do anything in terms of dysautonomia because it's so difficult at a certain point in time to separate out what are the normal issues of aging and what might be some of your other issues from pure dysautonomia, where in kids you can see it much more clearly because they don't normally have all of those other confounding illnesses and factors related to it. And typically when you find a young person with dysautonomia, their big issue is fainting. They stand up and they have what's called postural orthostatic tachycardia. They stand up, their vascular system can't tighten down fast enough, so gravity pulls the blood down. It goes out of the head, they faint, and so once they're laying on the ground and things equalize, that issue passes. But it's very difficult because they don't look sick, and it's a big problem in school because these are very healthy-looking children, but yet they have to have a water bottle with them at all times to keep their fluid level up. And then every other kid in the class wants to know, why can't I have mine? And so it's a difficult situation. Even something as simple as a water bottle, you've got to kind of go and fight with the system over. And so I give those kids a lot of credit and their parents, and we do a lot through DINA, which is the organization, to try and support them and give them helpful hints on how to deal with the nurse at school and the school board, which have no idea what to do when you have an orphan disease like dysautonomia.
David, we talk each week about the feeling that so many caregivers and so many patients have that they are the only ones going through this. And Debbie has been going on to the lupus website, and they have an online support system. And it is absolutely amazing that you read post after post after post, and so many people are saying the same thing, and yet they all feel that they're all alone in this world going through those symptoms. And autoimmune disorders are really a tough diagnosis in so many ways.
Yeah, I know it is. And today I was doing a support group this afternoon after you and I did that phone-based seminar for Purposeful Planning Institute. Mm-hmm. You did a great job.
Thank you, as did you.
Well, Mutual Admiration Society. But I had a woman who was brought in for the first time as a caregiver, and she was so angry at her husband for getting ill because she didn't plan her life this way. And she was a very regimented individual, and you could see that. And I said, would it be easier if he had a different kind of a disease? I said, what do you mean? I said, well, suppose he just had cancer, all right? And you could still take this cruise that you'd planned on for the last 8 or 9 years, but that you can't do it because the dementia places too much responsibility on you to constantly be trying to find where your husband is. Even if you brought somebody along to keep an eye on him, it might be difficult. And I said, so would it be easier if he had cancer and just came through chemotherapy but was able to take the cruise? And she stopped and she thought about it and she said, well, yeah. So I said, you're not mad at your husband, you're mad at the disease. I said, he didn't pick the right one. And she stopped and thought for a moment, and two of the other caregivers in the group said to her, look, you got to keep moving on from this. You can't get caught up in the fact that your husband has what he has and that there's no life for you after this. And this was her first time in a support group, and she came in, she was so cynical. I don't need this. What's this going to do for me? You know, and it wasn't me, but it was the rest of the group, as always, that kind of called her out on it and said, look, you know, we all went through this. We're all going through this. You're not alone. You can be as angry as you want, but the only one you're beating up is you, and that's no way to live a life. And by the time she left, I had to leave to come to the show, and three of the caregivers and this woman were still sitting at the table. They were on autopilot. I didn't have to be there, and I was very pleased to see that. Yeah.
Frustration and anger. I mean, boy, they go hand in hand with so many of these diseases.
Yeah, well, this was resentment, dead on.
It went on past that, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. But I told her, please, hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks, because that group meets every other week. And she said absolutely. She couldn't believe that showing up for a support group that she was extremely cynical about even coming to, but one of the women in the group had been asking her for 3 weeks to come. And she said, no, no, no. And at the last minute, she says, all right. And begrudgingly, she came, and she brought her husband, and he was in the activity room because this was at Arden Court. And he had a great time. And I think she got a lot out of it. And I said, please don't be a stranger. I gave her my card and said, if you run into any more problems, call before the next group.
And how appropriate with our Wisdom Warrior with us tonight.
Oh, yes. And Muriel is some of the best.
Thank you, Dave.
Well, we're looking forward to that later on.
Yeah, because Muriel is one of my long-standing members and a great support group participant. And while she's probably younger than most of the people in the group and has a phenomenally great attitude, but a wonderful individual in terms of sharing and saying it like it is. And tomorrow we tape our support group. Muriel is one of the most enthusiastic and is probably, along with another handful, the glue that keeps us all moving forward. Anyway, that's enough ego gratification until you speak.
It's worth the trip to get here.
All right. And no, we're delighted to have you here. So anyway, not only do we have a wisdom warrior with us, you know, I was reading on the internet, and people need to be very aware. They had just concluded a very small study on the flavanol, which is one of the ingredients, one of the constituent parts of chocolate. And they were doing a study and for 3 months, where normally in normal chocolate that we would get in a chocolate bar or whatever, there's about maybe 10 or 15% flavanol. The kind that they were doing, Mars, the candy company, had come up with an extraction process, and it was almost 900% flavanol. And what they found, but you know, one cannot draw any conclusions, that folks who did not have dementia but were seniors, or at least above the age of 65, which I consider to be young. Senior's the wrong word, but we haven't found one yet to fit in, actually had better cognition and recall. And, you know, we've always known that chocolate has a lot of benefits, but you really need it in this hyper form. And so we'll see whether or not we'll be able to get hyper chocolate
Can you imagine if that to be the magic?
Well, I don't know
What a
that
nice
I don't
solution.
know that it's going to cure,
No.
but if it keeps our cognitive capability a little bit clearer, and it tastes good, so what's wrong?
Such a problem.
Right. So anyway, you will probably be seeing that in the next set of news blurbs.
They did
that-
last night, but they also said they didn't talk about the concentrated chocolate, but they said you'd have to eat like the equivalent of 40 chocolate bars.
Yeah,
in
but
order to
even
have
if
any
you ate
value.
40 chocolate bars and
Then you die from
right, well, that
something
was
else.
like Paul after Thanksgiving, you know.
Right.
But even then, you wouldn't get enough of it. All right, and so the secret is that it has to be this extractive process,
Right.
and hopefully it's one more little thing on the highway to understanding what it is that manipulates our brain with certain chemical activity, whether it's flavanols, bioflavanol. You know, these are all things that we see when we read a label, but in some respects, they really do have a very definite role to play, and we'll see where this one rolls out. Paul?
Well, David, I wanted just to comment a moment on the program that we did today, just to update our listeners with the Purposeful Planning Institute. We spoke on a webinar today that will run all week long on replay to about 20 multidisciplined professionals, literally all over the world, who do planning, from very simple to very sophisticated planning, financial planning, business succession planning. And one of the things that David and I are very adamant about is that those professionals who are in the financial services industry really take a closer look at doing that care planning for their loved ones. And David and I have been working on a tool to make these planners, to make people who help other people care aware. And this tool is going to be available for those planners coming out shortly. David?
Yep, and we're very excited about it because it's not designed to turn financial planners into social workers or geriatric care managers. What it does is there is a 4 or 5 hour kind of program to orient them to the issues involved in caregiving. And at that particular point in time, what we've done is we've created what we call the CareGiver audit. And what it does is it goes through and it asks questions that have nothing to do medically, nothing to do with their financial planning, but it evaluates or allows them to evaluate how stressful is their life, how much practical problem solving do they think they can do. And it runs a gamut of questions that when we get that form back, we then drive a narrative that says, here's what that audit said. You were strong here, you were weak here, you ought to consider this. Here are other issues. Please bring this up with your financial advisor. Maybe you need to rethink how you're doing certain things, because one of the issues that's going on is that financial planners, and they do a great job, and they help you plan for retirement, but most people don't realize when they're planning is that you could live to be 85 or 90 at the drop of a hat today, but have a loved one or somebody else who contracts a serious chronic illness that can literally, from a cost perspective, wipe you out. And so, and not only is it in the respect of making sure that there are dollars to take care of your loved one, but many people have spent down to their last dollar, and then when their loved one passes, they have no money left, and they've still got a period of time in their lives to live, and they go, oh my God, I didn't plan the right way. Because why? Not because I'm stupid, not because my care plan, not because my financial planner wasn't ignorant. He just didn't know about the subject of caregiving. And so what we're seeing is that regulators and others now are starting to raise this issue, because the person you trust to do these things is your financial planner, your CPA, whatever it may be, that helps you with these things. And if they're not aware, then you're not going to plan for it. And we all need to. I mean, we're all living longer. The cost of care is getting expensive. If anybody thinks that we'll be able to put everybody in an institution and have Medicaid pay for it, they're very, very wrong. And most of this is going to go home and happen on a family caregiver's watch. And so if you haven't made some preparation and some awareness for what may be coming, then it's going to be very tough sledding. And so it's really a discussion that needs to be had, just like every other discussion that goes around caregiving, whether it's your advanced directives or what you want people to do when circumstances happen. And so that's what we discussed today. And I think it was very well received. And while there were 20 on, the rest of the Purposeful Planning Institute, which is another 180, will all get copies of what went on today, along with the podcast, the seminar, and we distributed through Purposeful Planning this care audit and the narrative and the forms that go with it so that they could familiarize themselves with it. And
well, David, 29 years in practice, when we spoke about care and caregiving, people immediately went to the financial and they said, I have long-term care insurance, or I've put money aside for that. And certainly that's a very, very important aspect of caregiving. But when we look to more of the qualitative type of issues associated with it, the definition of family has changed. Who is going to do the caregiving? Where will it be done? What role will each person play? It's way beyond the money, and that's part of the conversation that needs to happen. And my suggestion to our listeners is that this is something the next time you speak to whomever it is that helps you in your planning, saying, I want to spend some time and talk about what happens if I or my loved one gets sick. How is that going to be handled, not only with the money, but beyond the money?
I think that's very, very well said. I see by the clock on the wall, it is time for us to take a break. You're listening to us. This is the Caregiver Reality Hour, caregiverreality.com, iHeartRadio, WWNN 1470 AM, and 1470.com. And so we'll be right back, and we're going to have Muriel on and with her words of wisdom.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse or loved one who can no longer take care of himself or herself? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Do you feel burned out, frustrated, and just don't know where to turn? You've tried doctors, lawyers, and mental health professionals and have come to realize that they don't have practical answers to these questions. What you need are experts, non-clinical family caregivers with 25 years of active experience helping thousands of family caregivers like yourself. People who can help you provide a better quality of life for yourself and your loved one. Who you need are David Levy or Paul Vadiato. Reach David at caregiverreality.com or reach Paul at caregiverreality.com and let them help you pick the right path towards improving the quality of life for you, the caregiver, and your loved one. CFC support helps fund research. You can too. Each year, thousands of men and women serving their country in the U.S. military, as well as other employees of the federal government and the U.S. Postal Service, provide support for medical research to find treatments and cures for diseases. This is done through the Combined Federal Campaign, an annual workplace giving campaign that allows eligible individuals to support charities, such as those that conduct medical research, through a payroll deduction. Money donated this way to the medical research charities and its member organizations helps fund research to fight diseases from Alzheimer's to cancer, multiple sclerosis, blindness, breathing disorders, and much more. The diseases included afflict people of all ages, from the very young to the very old. You don't need to be a member of the military or a federal government employee to support research to help you or those you love that are suffering from an illness or disease. Donations to our not-for-profit tax-exempt organizations are tax-deductible and provide a vital source of funding in the fight to defeat some of life's most dreaded diseases. Please visit the website of the Medical Research Research Charities, which can be found at medicalresearchcharities.org. That's all one word, medicalresearchcharities.org. On that website, you can learn more about our member charities and make a donation in support of the research they're conducting for a specific disease or family of diseases. You can make a donation to Medical Research Charities itself and support the work of all our member charities. Please visit our website today, medicalresearchcharities.org. Become a part of Joining Forces to Find a Cure.
Hello, South Florida, America, and the world. This is David Levy, co-host on the CareGiver Reality Hour, and talking to you live from South Florida. We have a show that no one should miss because we're talking to 50 million caregivers in the United States and probably 100 million around the world. It's an opportunity to hear what the experts have to say, and more importantly, if you realize that the market for caregiving is as enormous as it is, you should get in touch with us because we're looking for certain select advertisers that want to be part of the Caregiver Reality. And those of you that want to be part of the Caregiver Reality family, get in touch with us, David at caregiverreality.com, Paul at caregiverreality.com. We'll get back to you because this is too important in your marketing to miss.
This is Caregiver Reality with gerontologist David Levy and caregiver expert Paul Vadiato, who ask you to call in and speak with him on the air toll-free at 888-565-1470. That's 888-565-1470 to share a story or important information. Now, back to today's Caregiver Reality Show.
And we're back. And as promised, Paul and I are still here. Muriel's here. Medical Research Charities, you just listened to their ad. I will say that the federal campaign for the end of the year is now open. One of the things that they do is they solicit the federal employee from post office and whatever, everything short of military, to make charitable contributions that then go to their constituent underlying organizations. But I will say, and I said it again last week, is that all of these charities need help. All of them are working in whatever particular area, disease that they focus on to try and do research, find cures, and improve the quality of life for people that have cancer, that have Alzheimer's, whatever the particular disease may be. And while they do solicit the federal employee, there's about 2 million federal employees, maybe a little bit more than that. And we can't expect the federal employee to carry the whole load for research. It's up to the NIH, it's up to individual philanthropy, and it's up to you, our listeners, and millions like you, to please make a contribution, whether it's to Medical Research Charities or directly to the organization for the illness or disease that you feel most strongly about. The only way that research is going to work is because we get behind it with dollars, and it makes a difference. One of the things that I want to say that was such a disappointment, not with Medical Research Charities, but if you recall a couple of years back, President Obama said that we would really push forward on Alzheimer's and hopefully have a cure by 2025. Well, it's 2014. We're a couple of months short of 2015, which is less than a decade. And unfortunately, I don't believe, and believe me, nobody wants to see it more than I do, that we're going to find a cure in the next decade. We're still even looking to understand the brain. But one of the big difficulties is the federal government, while they made, this wonderful prediction of what would happen by 2025, they only put about $500 million from the NIH behind the research. Every year, cancer and diseases such as that, and I don't play one off against the other, get $3-4 billion to keep pushing forward on research. And we're not going to find a cure for Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia unless the dollars are there. And the other thing is, if we do not have real-life human beings like you and me raise our hand and say, we're willing to be part of some of that testing, some of that investigational research, we will never get there. We just can't do it out of a Petri dish. We can't do it just with mice. We do need to have human beings. And if ever there was something worthwhile that you could put your heart towards, it's trying to participate in one of these studies. Down here in South Florida, there are 3 new ones that are going on right now, all of which are trying to start with a little bit younger person that doesn't have or showing the obvious signs of dementia, so they can track and see what keeps them free of it, or possibly even what it is that happens to make those changes in the brain. But we don't get people unless they raise their hand and sign up. And that's something that I feel very strongly about. I'm part of one of those research studies myself, and I say to everybody, it's a small part to play in fighting a huge disease that we know little about.
Well,
Paul?
A contribution, as small as it might be or as large as it might be, goes a long way in helping the total picture. So please be generous. I know the holidays are coming up, but every dollar does matter, and research charities, just an amazing, great people, and
worth your time.
They do an amazing job.
All right. Paul?
Well,
why don't you introduce Muriel?
We often speak here on the air about our wisdom warriors and about support groups, and certainly in that category is Muriel, and we've depended upon her so many times for an understanding of what it is like. So Muriel, may I ask you to talk a little bit about your story with caregiving and about support groups for a second?
Okay, first I'd like to say that, as you recall, David, Marty was part of a research group here in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And not only did I feel that it was something good for the future of whomever, but it also offered a little bit hope that maybe they would find something, not to cure him, but to prolong his quality of life as long as they could, that maybe the disease wouldn't progress at the same rate, might have slowed it down. And so it offered a little hope, and at the same time, too, I also felt that it was doing something good, something worthwhile.
And it's very commendable. And it's people like yourself and your late husband, Marty, that make a difference for everybody else, because you were willing to allow him to participate. He wanted to participate, and whatever his contribution was, big or small, it's all part of moving things forward. And so you're to be commended, and respectfully in his honor, so is he.
Well, the short story is that it's almost 2 years since he passed away. December will be 2 years. And it's a tough disease. But in a way, I might have been, quote, luckier than some, in that he had a major stroke, which was probably unrelated to the Alzheimer's. So he ended up in a nursing facility for 8 months total. And so it was quick. And I think it just lessened his having to deal with this disease as well as my own.
And you were lucky in one respect. I recall you had a very good friend, a neighbor, whatever,
Yes.
that was the substitute Muriel when you just had about all the caregiving that you could handle.
Yes, and I was paying her, which, she was very happy about. And it relieved a lot of the burden on me, because, frankly, I couldn't sit there for hours. I mean, it was just too emotionally
draining.
wearing. Yeah, just couldn't do it. So,
And that's easy to understand. I remember when you first came to the support group, and you were angry.
oh yes,
All right, you couldn't play cards with your neighbors. You couldn't get out to that tennis game, and you had a lot of anger about the disease and the circumstance that it put you in. But you certainly, over the period of time, the few years that I've known you, it's been 2 years, but I knew you a good year and a half, 2 years before then, is that I've watched you not only bounce back from caregiving, but also be such a wonderful guide and resource for others in the group that haven't gone as far along in things as you have. And not only that, but to see you back looking as well as you do, participating in life, taking those
Very much
cruises, and being grateful for everything that's happened to you. You've been a wonderful role model in terms of caregiving.
Well, my philosophy is, you don't know how long you have left for yourself, and so you want to make the most of whatever you do have. And if I'm given the opportunity to do something, I rarely say no. If somebody calls up and says, "Hey, you want to go to the movies? You want to go out to dinner?"
You're there.
I'm there. I'm easy.
Well, that pay it forward is just so important in helping others as you've been there. Getting back to the support groups, Muriel, how did you find David's support group? And David mentioned that you were so angry when you first went on there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, I found David's group by accident.
Well, that's okay.
And like you said, I found the right group. A friend, I instinctively wanted a support group. And I went to one in Boynton, and it just wasn't the right one for me. I was early in this, quote, journey, and a lot of the people told stories that to me were just so horrifying that I wasn't ready to hear them. And there was very little interaction. First of all, they were sitting auditorium style, rows of chairs all facing front, which right away I couldn't relate to, because you had maybe 30, 40 people in the room with one speaker up front. And so everybody's, you're looking at the back of somebody's head. And so I didn't like that group, so I dropped out. And then a friend of mine whose husband also had Alzheimer's had told me about a wonderful group that she found, and she said it was Palmetto Parkway, which is close to where we are now. And I found this group on Palmetto Parkway, but it turned out that she was talking about one that was out west on Palmetto, and I went to one that was east.
And lo and behold.
And I even asked you if you knew this lady, and you said no, and I'm saying, that doesn't make sense. If she went to this group, you'd have to know who she is. And then I called her later, and she said, oh, no, it was a different group. And by that time, I was part of this group. And when I told you this story, I said, I came to the wrong group. And you said, no, you came to the right group. And you were absolutely right, David. It came to the right group. But getting back to the anger and the resentment, your life suddenly is turned upside down. And I shouldn't say suddenly, because it's gradual. And at the beginning, you're in denial. And you keep making excuses for all of the odd behavior that you start seeing. And then when it finally hits you that this is real, and this is dementia, and your life is, as I said, turned upside down, you are angry, and you are resentful, and I felt like I was in jail.
It's an interesting way of putting it.
Yeah, I mean, if I even wanted to go out and have lunch with a girlfriend, not that he would say, no, you can't go. He'd say, like, why can't I go? And then if I ended up not taking him, then I felt guilty and didn't enjoy my lunch.
Well, that's all part of the weaning process, and probably during that early time when we're in denial, everybody else around us knows that something has changed, but either they don't want to say anything.
I think some of our friends picked it up before I did.
Right. Well, normally I tell people that the ones that know it first is when your parents live in South Florida, just to make up a good example, and you're going to your nephew's bar mitzvah, and you haven't seen the family in a year and a half, or at least that assemblage of the family that knew you well. And all of a sudden they're saying, there's something a little different about Marty. What is it? Oh, it's nothing, too much sun. But they are usually the canary in the coal mine that start to alert you to the fact, because they knew both you and he when. And those changes, because they haven't seen you in 18 months or whatever the case may be, become much more apparent. And then it's a little harder to deny it when family starts saying something to you, even though you may not want to accept it or internalize it.
One of the shocking things that happened that kind of opened my eyes a little is when we were visiting my daughter in North Carolina, and he says to me, "So where are we sleeping tonight?" And I was like, "Here in Michelle's house." And he said, "Where?" I said, "In the guest room upstairs." And he had like no idea.
No frame of reference.
It's like, and we had stayed there many times before. So the question just kind of threw me. And so that was one of the first
Epiphany type moments.
Yes, that was one of the first wake up calls. And then, of course, there were many others after
right,
that.
and then you were fully awake.
Yeah, but it took a long time, David, because you deny. You really don't want to believe it.
And you said that the progress of the disease, the dementia moved forward, and then all of a sudden, Marty had a stroke.
Right.
And you and I have discussed that on many occasions, and even you just said it a few moments ago, that you might have even been fortunate in that unfortunate set of circumstances because it moved things forward into him being in a nursing home and maybe not going through 5 or 6 more years of dementia. I know that that's not, the way we normally would look at something like that and say, why would you want anything to hasten his demise? But when we recognize the devastation that comes from Alzheimer's, sometimes something as serendipitous as it were, as a stroke.
One of the people from our group said to me, "You were spared making what was the most difficult decision that there is. When is it time to put him into a facility?" And he said, "That decision was taken out of your hands. It was made for you." And in that sense, he was absolutely right. And I think making that choice is a very, very difficult thing. And Marty was not an easy, laid-back personality, and it would have been a really tough thing.
Well, I'm sure it is for everybody today.
Yeah. No, but I mean from him, because I couldn't even put him into a facility that would watch him for a few hours a day because he would walk out the door, and they couldn't hold up. They couldn't keep him, and they had to call me one time and say, you have to come pick him up.
Right.
Muriel, if I may, you were very blessed to find a very good support group.
Yes, absolutely.
And, we can extol the virtues of St. David as probably until the end of the show. But to our listeners who are out there, what is the yardstick to judge a support group that it's a good one and it's something that you ought to continue with?
I think it's a feeling. It's not an abstract judgment. When you walk in and you feel comfortable and you feel welcomed and you're not put on the carpet to speak. There are many new people that come in and they will say, "Would you like to share with us? And if you want to just listen, that's okay too." And they could sit for several weeks and maybe not say anything. And then eventually they'll open up. And the group was just so giving. I mean, the meeting starts at 9:30. We're all there at 9 because we're having coffee, we're hugging, we're kissing. How was your week? How was your week? And it's become a real social, warm family.
It does sound like family.
It has. And I've become very close to several of the people in the group to the point where we go to the movies, we go out to dinner, we
took a cruise.
We took a cruise, right? Six women went on a cruise together and we had a really good time. And I got invited for the holidays because I don't have family down here, and I was thrilled to get invitations, to come to holiday dinner. And so, but that didn't happen right away. That took time to develop. But
well, don't all relationships in that respect? I mean, we were the group, because it's kind of a little like the ocean. The tide comes in, the tide goes out. There are people there aren't, etc. But there seems to me that in that particular group that we're referring to, the Wednesday group, there is really a feeling of family, and that when somebody new comes in, they're not isolated. You're not trying to figure out, why am I here? the group makes you feel comfortable that you're there, whether or not, as you said, you're ready to speak or tell your story or whatever, or just want to listen and understand what the rules are. But I think the group itself has taken on a persona far bigger than just a support group that I run.
It's amazing. People have asked me, why do you still go? I mean, your husband's gone, and it's almost 2 years. I said, I'm going to go for the rest of my life, as long as that group is in existence, because it's something I look forward to. And at this point, I mean, it's even more social than sharing. And I don't have issues to bring up for myself, but I feel that I can offer help to people who do.
Right.
The newcomers.
Right. And that's one of the reasons, like tomorrow when we film The Wisdom Warriors, it's not so much that you have a specific caregiving issue, but what you have is a perspective on what you've come through, what you've observed in the groups and others around you that are enmeshed in caregiving. And I think it's that perspective that enlightens everybody.
You know, I can look back now and recognize behaviors and recognize things that I couldn't see when it was happening. And to somebody that maybe is first going through it now, I might be able to see something that they're not seeing because I've been through it.
Different pair of eyes.
Right. And if you can maybe point out in a gentle way as to what you think is happening and to what how you feel they could handle it, it could really help somebody get through a difficult time.
Right.
Muriel, support groups vary place to place and whatnot. Can you give us some examples of some of the things that are spoken of at a support group, such as the one that you attend?
Well, for the people who are going through it, a lot of it is, day-to-day issues. What's happening with my husband now, or my wife now, or she did this, or he did that, or, that in general.
Coping.
Well, I think that's a big part of what a support group
Right, and stuff.
is all about.
Medication, does this work, does that...
Because of your background, David, I mean, you have probably more medical knowledge, even though you're not a physician, than probably other caregivers. I did go to another group, too, which also was very short-lived. First of all, there were only 4 people who showed up. And the leader was a woman whose husband had died of Alzheimer's, but she absolutely was a novice, and she had one solution to everything anybody brought up. If you talk about some bizarre behavior, well, that you're his anchor. You're his anchor. You're his to whatever anybody said, and I think she said it like 10 times in an hour, and I was like, okay, I had enough. So you could go to a support group, and if you feel it's not right for you, if you're in an area that has more than one, then look elsewhere.
Right.
Or
we're
go
lucky
online.
in that respect, is that Florida has its, or at least here in South Florida, its fair share. Many people that are listening are living in areas that a support group may be far and few between. And for those, I would always say, look on the internet. Be careful. But there are many really good, caring people that can assemble.
I did that for a while.
Right.
I went to
in chat groups and chat rooms and things like that.
I went to a website, an Alzheimer's website, and it wasn't actually a chat room, but you would post, and then people would respond to your posts. And I didn't post that much, but I did read what people had to say. And that in itself, that was before I found your group. So that's an alternative.
And it can be very good. The thing that you have to be careful of is not knowing what people's agendas are, and sometimes whether or not the suggestions, especially whether it involves medication or certain techniques that, as to whether or not they're well-grounded or whether or not they're just, Well,
you don't have to take it as gospel.
But no, I understand that. But there are a lot of people, when they're floundering and are looking and are hoping that what they're dealing with has some solution, and if somebody offers a solution. I'll give you a perfect example, and I'll take 1 second. Suzette, who has dysautonomia, and so I belong to a dysautonomia website over and above what's involved with the kids. And the other day there was a doctor, I won't name him, who said he had some revolutionary technique for dealing with dysautonomia. And so the first thing I did was put it out to a bunch of experts that I know, both doctor and lay people, and they said, avoid this guy like the plague. He is just one more charlatan, playing on people's fear and hope for something that if this technique really worked, and he's been around for a while, not down here, believe me, others would have been aware of it, adapted it, et cetera, et cetera. And I say that to everybody who's listening. You just have to be careful, because in the world of things like Alzheimer's or dysautonomia or lupus, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is.
I think that's true of any disease. It could be cancer or whatever. There are people who are going to take advantage of the situation.
And be exploitive,
and,
yes.
Yeah. Muriel, I have attended some of the support groups that David has led, and sometimes there's somebody who's really going through a tough time at that period, and the support group becomes very, very important. Talk about a little bit about that.
Well, one of the things that, as soon as you said that came to mind is when this person is having a really hard time, as soon as the group is over, everybody goes over to this person and they hug and they say, please come back. We want to see you back here. And it's very enveloping. And I think that in itself is an enormous
to find
support.
People that understand and aren't shunning you because you're going through what you're going through.
I was thinking of that man that was there, and he was crying. He was so upset with his wife, and everybody just went over to him after the meeting and, please come back. We want to see you again.
Mm-hmm.
And, got a couple of hugs, and he felt better when he...
Yeah, I don't think anybody leaves there worse off than they came, and not because it's my support group. That has nothing to do with it. The quality of the people that are there and what they have to contribute and how they coalesce either around an individual or come together as a family for each other week after week after month. I mean, some of the people in the group, Muriel, been around for 7, 8, 9 years.
On the other hand, there are some people that don't come back. I mean, it can't be 100% effective. I mean, there are people that have come with their stories and have cried and shared, and they say, come back, and then you don't see them again.
Right.
I think that's so important, is that they leave feeling a little bit better, and they feel as if they've been heard.
Yeah, well, where else are you going to be heard?
Well, yeah, it's a place for a data dump. At least you've told your story, and others have said, either we understand or, here's a perspective that you might want to consider. And some people just aren't group people.
I was just going to say, some people don't like to speak up or to go to a group. And I know that I've always gravitated towards help of some kind. I was widowed once before when I was very young. And I know I immediately sought out a widow and widowers group because I needed somebody to share with.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I was 30 or 40 years younger than everybody else in the group, but I did find one woman my age, and we immediately became instant friends. And it was really all I needed. So sometimes it's a question of just one person. Right,
just so that you've got somebody that, when it gets tough, you can pick up the phone and say, I'm having a lousy day.
She called me one time and she said, next week is my anniversary. Would you go out to dinner with me?
Yeah.
And of course, so we cried. And
we have our little support group of 2.
Right. Where Paul, who loves to get up far earlier than I, I know that when I hear the text message go ding, it's Paul, and I go,
my phone rang earlier than I'm used to also.
Yeah.
I know that he's getting underway, and but no, we normally speak in the morning and say what's going on, how things going for the day. Normally we catch up with one another because we do so much together. But many's the time he said, "Boy, lousy night," you know.
Yeah.
And, all right, well, you know, go take a nap. Do what you got to do.
Some of the problems that as a caregiver that I have to deal with, and I suppose many of them, is dealing with the adult children who either may or may not be on the same page as where you are on there. And I'm sure you've heard a lot of those type of stories in support groups.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have to say to our listeners about dealing with adult children who sometimes just don't get it?
Well, I was fortunate in having pretty good support from the children, but I think you have to ultimately make the point that they can help, but they're not in charge.
Oh,
You're
so important.
Wow.
You're in charge.
Yes.
And you have to, in a gentle way, make that clear. Unless they want to come and take over completely, don't tell me that I'm doing something wrong. Unless you want to take it over.
Right. And that's especially difficult in a second marriage.
Yeah, as this was.
David,
Right.
that's on music.
Is it
Oh, wow.
really?
It just went so fast.
Muriel, this went so quickly.
I
You
could've
were
used
so
another hour.
terrific. We're going to have you back.
Oh, yeah.
South
Anytime.
Florida, America, and the world, thank you so much for listening to the Caregiver Reality Hour. We'll be back next Tuesday. In the meantime, as Paul would say, take very good care of yourself, but I'm not going to steal his thunder, Paul.
Thank you so much for joining us, Muriel. Thank you.
Thank you.
So good today. We really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Caregivers, have a great week and take good care of yourselves.
And
We'll
thank
see
you
you.
for having me on the
Oh,
air.
you're more than welcome, and I'll see you tomorrow
Yes.
for taping.
Absolutely.
All right, the Wisdom Warriors assemble on Wednesday.
Right.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Reality Show. Each week, David Levy, a gerontologist, and Paul Vadiato, a caregiver expert with a combined over 25 years of experience, providing practical and realistic help to caregivers struggling to keep up with the needs of a loved one who are unable to care for himself or herself. To reach David Levy, email him at david@caregiverreality.com. Or to reach Paul Vadiato, email paul@caregiverreality.com. And find out more online. Just go to caregiverreality.com. See you next week.